Reverend TJ, who invited me to preach and worship with you this morning. Much thanks to the team that I have been able to work with over the last few weeks, Marie Ann, Dennis, Karen, Richard, and Ian, and especially Stuart, who is way behind the scenes, but I finally got to meet today. Suzette, who I do not see on right now, has also been very helpful in coordinating compensation, which is so important for the vitality of our ministry, the ministry and pulpits we share as Unitarian Universalists. I also noticed that Marianne and I are relying heavily on the words of Amanda Gorman today, which is important because we cannot use the words of Black women and femmes very lightly. When we say that Black lives matter, we mean that Black femme, Black female, and Black trans lives matter. Every Black life is the result of a Black woman, Black femme, or Black non-binary person who made a choice to help bring life into this world. There is no one of us on this call, in this worship space, who is not touched by the decisions that Black women, Black femmes, and Black non-binary folk have made across the ages. Indeed, we have known how to terminate pregnancies since almost as long as we have been in civilization. So Black life is always a choice. And the Black lives that have been able to grace this pulpit, as well as those that we have received wisdom from in pre-recordings, they all matter. They all matter. Each and every one of us is the result of a decision of Black femmes and Black trans folk who said, maybe in the future, we'll listen differently. So listen, hear, feel, taste as if it were your favorite beverage. Know that Black women, Black femmes, Black non-binary people speak a wisdom that we can only just glimpse because it is rooted in an understanding of the world that we are still trying to reach. I say all of this so that we remember that the world is not a safe place. It's just not. It is, however, the only place for us to practice being brave and faithful together. And although some of us are just beginning to realize how safe the world has never been, from now on, we must choose connection and faithful risk over comfort. Choose connection and faithful risk over comfort, beloveds. And we can begin doing that by comforting the afflicted and afflicting the comfortable. This is a saying that maybe you have heard before. It actually refers to the roles that newspapers play in our life. American humorist Peter Finlay Dunne, who was of Irish descent, wrote it in 1902 in the Mr. Dooley comics. Mr. Dooley was an Irish immigrant who ran a bar on the south side of Chicago, which is also now a heavily Black area due to the Great Northern Migration of the early 20th century. He writes that newspapers do everything for us, including comforting the afflicted and afflicting the comfortable. We know from the prayer that we shared earlier this morning, we know from the ways that we write in our books of life together, that joy and grief shared are easier to bear. And I tell you, and I need you to know that surely any progress toward the beloved community requires a radical redistribution of suffering. None of us should be comfortable all of the time, while some of us must be uncomfortable all of the time. And so what is this beloved community that we talk about so frequently in Unitarian Universalism, that I will speak about at length today in this time that we share. Once again, returning to the poet Amanda Gorman, she writes in The Hill We Climb, which she shared at the inauguration just about 10 days ago. And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge our union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gaze not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. The beloved community, or any understanding of the beloved community we can share, actually looks a lot like the world we have today. We are not upset that it looks this way because we know that together we make a better world. Together, there is something out there that we are reaching for, that we are striving for, that we are called to. Because in that world, in that beloved community, we are able to access financial, spiritual, and community resources more easily. Yes, beloveds, there is suffering in the beloved community, but it is shared so that it is manageable. Yes, beloveds, there is injustice in the beloved community, but we have the skills for working through the pain and suffering that comes when we do not treat one another fairly, when we do not treat one another equitably. Yes, beloveds, sometimes people will go without a meal, and we will know together that that is untenable, and rework and reimagine ways that no one has to go without a meal while other people have excess ever again. The beloved community looks a lot like the world we have today. It is grounded in the realities of our present day suffering, but allows us to faithfully work toward a world we know can be better. It is time now for us to work for the beloved community as people of faith. I'm going to tell you what that means. We've already discussed that working for the beloved community requires a radical redistribution of suffering. We need to make sure that as people of faith, we are sharing both our joy and our sorrow, that no one has an undue burden of sorrow while so many people have an excess burden of joy. Joy and sorrow mingle together to make sure that we can continue to be, and to make sure that we can continue to bring into being the beloved community we so urgently need. To work as people of faith for this community we so urgently need requires us to be explicit and loud about our values as Unitarian Universalists. Some of these values, I say, are justice, equity, compassion, and the sanctity, the holiness of all Black life. When we are loud about justice, it means that we are working for structures that allow everyone, each and every person, indeed perhaps all creation, to be treated fairly. When we are working for equity and we are loud about equity, we are making sure that each and every person, each and every creature, and indeed perhaps all creation has what it needs not only to survive, but to thrive. Getting through to the next day is not in line with the wildest dreams we have for the world that we can bring into being. We must dream bigger and work toward that world together. When we are loud about compassion, we are able to meet people exactly where they are, where their suffering and where their hurt lies, and also challenge one another to do better than our best. All pain is indeed pain worthy of consolation. It is worthy of tending to. But if your pain gets in the middle of the work we must do for justice and equity, if finally having to come to account that your power and privilege on the institutional level causes some people undue suffering, while you get to ignore the consequences of moving around naively, we can meet you where you are and also challenge you to lean in, to do better than your best, to look for connection rather than comfort. And when we are loud about Black life, when we are loud about the sanctity, the holiness of Black life, we are able to remember that global racism is conditioned upon anti-Blackness. It requires us forgetting that Indigenous people ever existed, so a mythical race of white people can occupy spaces that were never theirs to begin. There is no land from which all white people come. There is no ethnic group of the whites. When we hold as valuable and worthy and holy all Black life, we can start to get free together. So we need to get loud and explicit about our values as Unitarian Universalists, which include justice, equity, compassion, and Black life. And finally, when we are working toward a beloved community as a people of faith, we must also be faithful. Here, the fifth source of our living tradition helps us. We remember that the humanist teachings, which counsel us to heed the guidance of reason and the results of science, also warn us against idolatries of the mind and of the spirit. It is insufficient for us only to work for science-based outcomes. We also must work for outcomes without any objective proof that we will ever get there. We need to work for a better world which we may never inhabit, because it is right, it is worthy, and it is a faithful thing to do. We do not only do things because they are likely to happen. The things we do faithfully, we do because they also must happen for us all to be in a community where we belong and where we are beloved. We need to use accountable strategies that have led to outcomes that are similar to the ones that we desire, but also work for those outcomes even if we're not sure that they will ever work. And we cannot stop at imagining a community only where everyone belongs, because we must do better than our best. We have to do more than welcome people in. We have to create the conditions whereby we can reimagine what it means to belong in the first place. This beloved community does not just welcome people in, it is the condition for new understandings of the beloved community itself. We must do better than our best. And to do that, we have to make certain decisions. And here is where I need your help, congregation. I need you to consider some questions. I need us to consider some questions. If you want to respond in the chat pod, please do, and I will weave them into this part of the message. From now on, we need to consider, how will we do things differently to work toward the beloved community? How will we do things differently to work toward the beloved community? Type it in. Matt, yes, you did get that quotation right. None of us must be comfortable all of the time, while some of us are uncomfortable all of the time. How will we make decisions differently so that those conditions are not the way we continue to live? As you continue to ponder, I'll ask you another question. From now on, how will we work with others to bring about a beloved community that radically redistributes suffering? From now on, how will we work with others to bring about a beloved community that radically redistributes suffering? Now, final question. From now on, how do we ensure that we're moving faithfully toward beloved community? From now on, how do we ensure that we're moving faithfully toward beloved community? Your responses have begun to come in. We need to ask ourselves if it benefits me or the lives of others who don't have the advantages that I have had. For some of us, asking if it benefits me is also a question about whether it benefits our communities. For some of us, we need to challenge the individualism that is part and parcel of the American imperialism that continues to damage the people we so desperately wish to be. We need to continue to ask ourselves questions that move us forward, but not only that move us forward, but move us toward an accountable future, move us toward an accountable reality. We need to right women in prisons in Hawaii. We need to write with compassion. We need to end prisons, beloveds. We need to end prisons. I am a prison abolitionist, and there is no beloved community where we need to lock people in cages in order to know love, compassion, and justice. There may be ways that we need to remove people from community, but I do not believe that cages are the best of what we can do. We need to notice and respond. Noticing is insufficient for the work of beloved community. Who is here? Who isn't here? Why aren't they here? Whose voices are absent? And are they truly safe, or can we make spaces where they can risk faithfully to say what they think and believe? We cannot just notice. We need to make sure we are in spaces where people whose voices we have ignored for far too long are the voices we listen to the most. We can work not to be afraid of the language of faith. Faith at its core is doing what is right and good together for outcomes we cannot be certain of. Take that, leave that, make it whatever you need it to be. But know, as a people of faith, and Unitarian Universalists are indeed people of faith, we have pledged with one another over generations, indeed perhaps over a millennium, to work together accountably for outcomes that we cannot guarantee. And yes, white people, come and get yours. White people need to bring white people into community. White people need to bring white people into accountable relationship. White people need to remind white people that white people alone will not solve the problems of systemic racism. There is so much space in the beloved community, not that makes room for white people, but sets the ground floor as a place where we can all belong. It is time for us to move on, but keep putting those messages into the chat pod. I need us to address one final issue as we work toward the beloved community. We need to be prepared for what happens if we fail. Again, the poet Amanda Gorman reminds us, let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true. That even as we grieved, we grew, that even as we hurt, we hoped, that even as we tired, we tried, that we'll forever be tied together, victorious, not because we will never know defeat again, but because we will never again sow division. Beloveds, we either make it all together or we do not make it to the beloved community at all. And as people of faith, I need to remind you that fear of failure is a faithless act. We do not have the time to fear that we might not get the outcome we desire. We work for it anyway, because that is what people of faith do. Because we know the world has never been safe. And we lose nothing by trying to make it better for everyone. And so from now on, we have to be brave. We have to be faithful, and we have to decide to move differently, to work for the world where we all belong and where we are all beloved. Beloveds, bring this world into being. So be it. See to it. Amen. Ashe, and blessed be.
For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift, which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad. For needs which others serve, for services we give, for work and its rewards, for hours of rest and love, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life. For sorrow we must bear, for failures, pain, and loss, for each new thing we learn, for fearful hours that pass, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life. For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift, which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad.
Beloveds, go forth from this place, making our own days glad for each and every person, for each and every being, and indeed all creation. From now on, we must be brave, we must be faithful, and we must decide differently, accountably, and together to work for a beloved community where all belong and all feel the love that we need. Go forth blessed.